Conscious Collaborations with Stephan Ward. Welcome to the School of Self-Worth Live, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Sam Osborne, the Self-Worth Guide. This is episode number 165, and it's an absolute pleasure to introduce, or welcome back, shall I say, for the maybe the fifth time, a very good friend of mine all the way over in New Jersey, near New York, Stephan Ward. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. This guy's a great friend of mine. Stephan, how you doing, mate?
I'm doing well, Sam. How have you been?
I've been
Doing very, very well.
I've been missing you. I've been missing you. Now,
Yeah.
Stephan, let me just introduce you to the people who are going to be watching this either live or later on. So, Stephan and I met during the pandemic, virtually,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
And so we've been watching each other and watching each other's journey for a while now. And Stephan is currently a youth motivational speaker, going into high schools and talking to young people about mental health and motivating them. And I believe that he's the man for the job. He's also a first responder, and he's a bloody great guy. So he's got some great stories and a lot of energy. And I'm just so pleased that you're on the live stream with me, Stephan.
Oh, man, Sam, thank you for that warm welcome. It's definitely a pleasure. Yes, Sam and I, we met probably about a year ago, a little bit more than a year, right? Just before the pandemic really kicked off. And great times there, great times. So as Sam said, I'm a youth motivational speaker. I'm in there inspiring kids, motivating them. I'm also a first responder. Been doing that for about the past 15 years. So I'm just loving life and helping out youth, helping out individuals just become the best version of themselves, and also just helping them get through mental health issues.
Yeah. Very important topic. Very important topic. All right. Well, we should go into that, into a little bit of detail. Like, let's talk about the problem right now. Let's talk about the problem that you're addressing when you speak to young people, and maybe a story that you want to tell in association to that.
Absolutely. Well, first I come in and I introduce myself and I let them know that, the first point that I get across is that individuals who have mental health are not bad individuals. And a lot of times we see on the news things and atrocities and sometimes very violent things happen as a result of individuals who are committing mental health, who may have mental health affairs. But I want them to know that the actions that may have been committed by these individuals doesn't necessarily mean that these individuals are bad people. And then I go into a story about how I lost my cousin in about 2010 to mental health. And how that went about was that she was my first cousin and she moved out to North Carolina with her husband, and they had 3 children. And my uncle, who also lived in North Carolina, they would keep in contact every now and then. But when my uncle would call my cousin to check up on her husband will always pick up and he could never reach her. And he would say, you know what, I'll have her give you a call. She went to the store. And my uncle, not thinking anything about it, he would say, all right, no problem. Then 2 weeks later went by, he would try to check up on his niece again. Again, the husband would pick up and he would say, I'll have her give you a call. She's in the shower. And my uncle was like, all right, no problem. But then after a while, he started to sense that something was wrong. And so what he did was he actually went to the house and had the police officers come there as well to do a mental health check, just to make sure that everything was okay. Now, turn to find out, they found my cousin in the closet strangled. Yes, they found her in the closet strangled. And when the cops actually came to approach the husband, like a shootout had occurred, and he wound up killing himself. And he wound up strangling one of my nieces and suffocating one of his children. And it was all due to mental health. And so when I give this story to the children, I let them know, hey, listen, remember what I said. The number one thing is that people who have mental health, regardless of what it is that they, the actions were, the violent actions, they're not bad individuals. And then they'll look at me and then they'll be like, well, how can you say he's not a bad individual? And here's why.
Yeah.
Because he knew that he had mental health issues and he actually went to go seek help about his mental health issues. He went and he told the individuals that he was seeking help from that I feel like doing harm to my family. But for whatever reason, he got turned away. And whatever occurred from there, pretty much, I don't know if it was an argument or what happened. No one knows what happened, but he wound up acting out on those urges. And
So
so no matter,
he wanted to do
he
something
wanted help.
about it, but in the end he couldn't help it.
He couldn't
For it
help
to
it.
bring harm
He couldn't
to
help it.
others and himself. Yeah, okay.
Right. So, in between us discovering that, he went to go get help for it, of course, me being a first cousin, the first thing I'm thinking is like, oh my goodness, how can you take the life of someone else? How can you take the life of, innocent children and then be a coward and then go out there and take your own life?
Yeah.
I thought that was the coward move. But then later on, it was discovered that he went out there and he tried to get help for it. And prior to that, he would put things on social media. Hey, listen, I'm going to be famous. Or he would just put little indications that said that was literally indicating that, he had trouble mentally.
Mm.
And that's what I also encourage the kids just to get involved. If you see individuals that may be suffering, because people with mental health is suffering in silence. And if you see this going on, I encourage them to go ahead and just let someone know, because you never know. It might be, a family member dating one of your family members who may be suffering from mental health.
Yeah.
And if they was putting these type of signs and signals out there, you would want someone to get involved and try to get these individuals help. So the number one important thing that I let them know is that I know we see a lot of negative things happening on the news that makes the headlines, but people with mental health issues, when we say mental health, I want you to remember mental health. They need help mentally. And let's try to go ahead and get involved and get them the type of help in which they need.
So if you're watching, ladies and gentlemen, the live stream right now, we're talking to a very good friend of mine, Stephen Ward, who's over in New Jersey, and he's a motivational speaker for young people around mental health. And thanks for joining. All right, Stephen, you talked earlier on before. Thank you very much for that story, by the way. It's a good one. Good point you make. I want to now go into, you mentioned finding the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to hear your definition of that, and I want to hear what you do in your mindset, or what you tell people they can do to be the best version of themselves. Tell us a story, tell us a concept that you use. Okay.
Well, I like quotes, and I think it was Abraham Lincoln that said, "Whatever you are, be a good one." And I come to the conclusion that to be yourself, there's a lot of individuals, and we see it promoted a lot. Be yourself, be yourself. But Sam, what does that really mean to be yourself? And so what I came up with this this acronym. BTBT means believe, trust, be theory. And what that means is, I believe to be yourself, you have to first believe. You have to first envision yourself and believe that it's possible. Sam, you have to believe that, you have to actually see the vision and believe within your own algorithm. We talk about algorithms out there, what you have to do to be compliant with social media, to get likes, to get visits. But what about the algorithm in here? What about the algorithm, fulfilling that algorithm and actually believing what it is and your capabilities? But that's not enough to be yourself. Because when it comes time to step up to the plate, I can believe all I want that I'm going to hit this home run. But I believe that the next thing that you need, the next ingredient, is to trust yourself. You have to trust in your capabilities. So when I believe in myself, I can step up to the plate. But when I step up to the plate, I need to be able to trust that everything that I practice, I need to be able to trust that all of the hours that I put in, that I can then execute those. And when I believe and I trust, then I believe that I can literally go out there and be myself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's very important, to believe and trust. And when you're able to do both of those, you can be yourself.
I want to explore this idea of algorithm, like your internal algorithm. And for me, I would use the word, framework, or your worldview, or your mindset. And I have chosen to see my life like a quest. Like everyone who watches these streams knows that I'm a big Joseph Campbell fan. I love the hero's journey and myth and story, and how we can use that to interpret what's going on inside our mind and on the outside of our world, to really tap into, I guess, what is most fulfilling for us individually and also for the people around us, and so that you can go on a quest and you can look for a quest. And the quest isn't always a breeze. In fact,
Right.
there's a lot of obstacles. And if you choose to interpret your life as a quest, you have to understand there's going to be trials, there's going to be, challenges, and there's going to be allies to make and enemies to make. And that's just the way it goes. And a lot of those allies and enemies are internal.
Mm-hmm.
And I talk a lot about imposter syndrome and self-doubt and perfectionism and these sorts of things. You can kind of see them like enemies, but if you go down the pathway of your own quest, you start to transform them into allies by reframing it, going, how can I say thank you to low self-worth? What has it given me to teach, or how has it benefited me? And you really explore who you are, and you create your own algorithm. That's at least the way I like to see it and the way I like to share to people. Um, Tell us more. Tell us more. What's a strategy that people can use to reprogram their algorithm or to find their best version of themselves?
Well, when I say the algorithm, it's because, when we hear about the algorithm and, post every day so you can get a certain amount of views and a certain amount of likes, that's good. That's helping us be compliant with, the social media platform that we're on. But what about when you post something and it doesn't get that amount of likes and it doesn't get views? What do you do then? Do you quit? Do that work on your self-esteem? Do you think that you're not worth it? Do it work on your self-worth?
I mean,
So that's what I think.
most people they feel down if they're not getting enough, attention.
And that's what I'm talking about. See, it's real funny that we would wake up every morning and we would try to be compliant and we would be on time when it comes to the algorithm and fulfilling what social media tells us to be compliant with that algorithm. But you need to work on yourself. So then that way, if you work on the algorithm here, then you understand that what you're putting out is the content that you want to put out, that's for whatever reason you're putting it out for. If you're putting it out to send a message out there, then that's your goal, to relay the message and to deliver the message,
Mm.
regardless of what type of feedback you get back from it. And that's what I mean by algorithm. If you become okay with that, then you'll become okay with everything else, because that, in a sense, helps your self-worth, and it's going to help your self. It's not going to cause you to have low self-esteem, because you have a totally different goal in mind. My goal is not necessarily to be compliant and to get all of these views and get all of these likes, even though we want to get that reception and we want to get that feedback back. But my goal is to, in a sense, work on me. Because remember, I always like to say, you need to become your first client. So before I can go out there and promote and help other individuals, I need to make sure that I'm mentally stable within myself to be able to handle, if I put this out there and it doesn't get that type of reception and feedback, hey, listen, that's okay, because my job is being completed by actually putting it out there and delivering the message. So work on the algorithm up there. Make sure you're emotionally connected to what it is that you're doing. If I put it out there and I feel like it's right, make sure I'm emotionally connected to, hey, listen, this is right. I feel that this is right. So I'm going to do this regardless.
Yeah, I was having a conversation today actually with a student um, about, this fear of what other people will think and say about you. And this kid must be 18, so but he was pretty switched on, and we're just saying, I said to him, the way I see it is that we spend so much of our time worrying about what other people will be thinking and saying about us, that it causes us procrastination and
Mm-hmm.
self-doubt, and it causes us to feel shitty about ourselves. But what I realized was that I myself don't think about other people and what they do. And then I realize that everyone's actually a bit selfish in that way, in that they're only really thinking about themselves and,
Mm-hmm.
a few people around them. But nobody's actually thinking about me as much as I think that they are thinking about me.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so I realized, so I'm making that up in my head, and therefore, if it's me, I can control that. I can go, well, I'm just going to put that to the side and carry on. And I realized it doesn't matter if I have a weakness called self-doubt. It's like, well, I've also got these strengths over here. I can tap
Mhm.
into them. But I learned, don't worry about getting rid of your weaknesses. Like, just bring it all with you. You
Mm-hmm.
go, that's me. And I go, you're more relatable if you have a few faults and defects.
Right.
People kind of go, I can relate to a person who, screws up every now and then, or, does strange things, or whatever, slips up. That's,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an endearing quality, and you don't necessarily have to try and push it down and get rid of it. You should say thank you to all parts of yourself, and then see what grows out of that.
Right.
If you give something attention and love, it transforms and grows. So
Y-
rather than try and push the self-doubt and the fears and imposter syndrome down, it's like, say, no, come and talk with me. Let's have a loving relationship with those parts of yourself. I know it might be a strange reframe, but it certainly makes it entertaining to be able to talk to yourself and
No, that's
those
true.
individual bits.
And when you think about it, when you think about the law of polarity, we need this in order to have that.
Hmm.
And so, we need up in order to have down. We need hot in order to recognize cold. We need dark in order to recognize light. So you're going to need weaknesses in order to recognize your strengths. You're going to need your strengths in order to recognize your weaknesses. And that together makes you you. That's your character. That's who you are. And you're absolutely right. But unfortunately, everybody wants to be the person on the other side of the curtains with the spotlight. We don't want to, you have a dancer, you have a singer. They want to be the Beyonce on this side of the curtains with the spotlight. They don't want to be the Beyonce on the other side of the curtains that's putting in 110, 150 hours of work. And they don't want to do all of that. And unfortunately, social media, it doesn't, when we look at individuals, that's why I'm glad that we have your show that promotes that it's okay to have weaknesses. It's okay to have both, because you're going to actually become yourself, and you can be actually better like that. Because if you don't embrace your weaknesses, then that can bring about imposter syndrome. And why? Because when I talk to you, and if I know that I have weaknesses, but I'm shying away from those weaknesses, now I got to act like somebody else. I can't
Yeah.
really act like
Yeah.
myself because I'm scared to show my weaknesses. So now I have to walk into imposter syndrome and act like I'm this man with all of this knowledge and I have it all together and I'm very perfect.
One of the best things I learned as an educator is to admit straight up to my students, go, look, sometimes I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't know the answer. But I will find an answer for you as best as I can. And some days I'm going to have good days, and some days I'm going to have bad days. And that's because I'm a guy, I'm a human. And then continue to facilitate their expertise, facilitate their learning, serve. And I can make as many mistakes as I can. Well, not too
Mm-hmm.
many, right? You still got to give an okay job. But if you just be yourself and say, look, sometimes I slip up and screw up, and oh, sorry, forgive me. People are like, yep, no problem. He's generally okay and a really good educator. And
Mm-hmm.
that has been my way of being an example of an adult who can, be resilient to their own mistakes and
Right.
fears and weaknesses. And I think I agree with you on this idea you said before: believe and trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those two are great concepts that everyone can start to explore. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, believe in yourself, and then trust yourself, and trust the value that you want to give to the world. Because I believe everybody's got self-worth. They just
Mm-hmm.
don't see it in their life
Mm-mm.
in the way that they want to see it. And if they just looked around at different areas of their life, you could see, well, there's a lot of worth over there. I'm
Yep.
giving out more value over there. Holy smoke, I'm actually giving it out over there. And that people often give themselves lots of self-worth, but they don't recognize it because they go, well, that's just normal. I do that anyway. It's natural. So they kind of minimize themselves. But let's talk more about believing and trusting, because I know that self-trust is a big problem for some people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't know how to do it. They don't know why they should do it. And I think that you might have a great couple of gems you might want to share, or a quote or a story about how does someone trust themselves.
Well, you know what? First, you have to get down to the root of why you don't trust yourself. I know myself, how I'm able to connect with students a lot. It's because I tell a story of when I grew up, and my father, who was very professional, he was a military man. And anyone who has ever been raised by anybody who was in the military, you know that they're pretty much cut and dry, very serious. Yes, so nurse, sir. But a lot of things that, the father-son relationship was kind of dysfunctional because I didn't have a lot of the acknowledgement and the approval from him. And what I mean by approval is every single thing that I felt like I did around my father was incorrect. He
Mm.
would tell me you was always doing something wrong. And it was to the point where instead of correcting me, I felt more so like it was a counseling session. When it was time for him to have patience and compassion, it was more so like a drill sergeant giving commands. Now, as a result of doing that and disciplining me without any type of directions on you did this wrong and this is what you can do correctly, that's destructive and that's dangerous. And as a result of that, you grow up very, very indecisive, like I did. And when you're indecisive, you're scared to make decisions of your own. When you're indecisive, you pretty much will lean on someone else to make decisions because I grew up feeling like anything that I would give my opinion for or anything that I would do would be absolutely wrong. So
Mm.
I think that you have to get down to the root of it because a lot of times people might not trust something that they're doing, or they may not have faith or confidence in anything that they're doing because of past trauma, like myself.
Mm. Mm.
I remember when I was working in the correctional settings, and I believe it was during Hurricane Sandy, and it was so much water that was filling up the pods, and we had to bring all of the inmates to the top floor. And we had one lieutenant who was training a brand new sergeant, and he said to the sergeant, I remember this story. All right, what do we do next? And the sergeant said, well, we would normally do. He said, I didn't ask you what we would normally do next. I want to know what would we do next? And he would give the correct, and the sergeant wound up giving the correct answer. Now, why did I give this story? Because when the sergeant left, he said, you know what, Stephen? A lot of times people know what they do. They know what to do. They just want to be told what to do.
Yeah, they need the
And so
validation,
they just want to be told what to do. And so
even though they're competent. Yeah.
it brings me back to my life when being very, very indecisive, you would depend on other people to take the lead. And then when they would answer, then you would chime in with what it is that you want to chime in with, but you wouldn't necessarily have that confidence to take the lead yourself. So the first thing I would say is like try to dig deep and find out where's that trauma coming from. And when you find out where that trauma is coming from, then you could go ahead and start to address it from there.
Hmm. Mate, this has been a bloody good conversation and lots of gems. I appreciate you being on this show. But we're going to wrap it up. So thank you again for being on the live stream. I want you to let people know where they can get in contact with you and follow you, or share your website. Go for it.
You can find me on listenachieve at Instagram.com. That's LISTENACHIEVE.com on Instagram, or Facebook, Stephen Ward.
Thank you so much, mate. It's been so good. I love these collaborations. If anybody's watching this, the replay, or watching right now, we've had a few people. It's been great. Stephen and I have actually got a couple of other conscious collaborations that we recorded about a year ago. So check them out. They're on YouTube, and check out Stephen's social media. All right, mate. We're going to say goodbye. We're going to say goodbye to people, but we'll keep chatting as we go off air.
Absolutely. Have a good one. Thank you.